and welcome to episode 1 of Vengeance and Reconciliation. I'm your host, Josiah Shaver. Now, the very interesting thing about this first episode is that this man that I interviewed requested to remain anonymous for certain reasons. What I can say is that he's a British Christian minister, and he's in his 80s, and he has been coming to the Holy Land since the 1960s. So he has a wealth of decades of experience and perspective in ministry and working with Israelis and Palestinians here. There's a lot to learn from, including things that he talks about, such as his original trips here in the 60s and afterward, including road trips from the UK. I'll let him tell more about that. He also talks about the First and Second Intifadas, the beginnings and the first elections of Hamas versus Fatah, and he gives a very broad, great historical overview of the Holy Land and his view of it since the 60s, and many other things, including common misconceptions that many Westerners have of Israelis and Palestinians and the Holy Land. I hope you enjoy it. And the last thing I'll say before we jump right in is that some of the audio is a bit scratchy because the mic setup wasn't optimal here. I apologize in advance for that. I could have cut these sections out, but I didn't want to because everything he said was very rich and worth keeping in full. With that, let's jump right in.
I first came to the Holy Land in 1964. As a student. A group of us, we bought an old bus in England, and we travelled all the way across Europe, right through Turkey, down through Syria, and we travelled through Damascus 2 days after there was a coup in Damascus in 1964, came down into Jordan, crossed into the West Bank, which was then, of course, occupied by Jordan, came through the Mandabar Gate into Israel, as was then, and because we couldn't go back, the bus was lifted onto a boat, a ship in Haifa, and we travelled to Naples, and then we travelled all the way back to England. That was my first visit. And my second visit was in 1968, after the Six-Day War. And again, it was in a bus with a group of students, because I was teaching religious education in England. And one Friday afternoon, the students said to me, "Sir, why don't we go on a field trip?" All the geography students, they go on field trips. And I said, "Well, where can we go for a field trip?" And one of the students, 17-year-old, he said to me, "Well, we could go to the Holy Land. We're studying the Bible." I said, "Oh, that's a stupid idea." And then we thought about it and talked about it. And in the end, we bought a bus and we travelled all the way across Europe, all the way to Istanbul and Izmir. We couldn't, of course, go in by land anymore. We couldn't go through Syria and Jordan then. So we went in on a boat with the bus, lifted onto the boat, into the Holy Land, travelled around the Holy Land, came back on a boat to Izmir, came back to England. That was my second visit to the Holy Land. And then a few years further, we sort of forgot a bit about it. I was married, we had children, and at the end of the 70s, the 1970s, and into to 1980, we decided to visit the Holy Land again with our children, and we visited the Holy Land, and we worked for a Christian organisation in Tel Aviv, and we travelled around the Holy Land. And one Sunday morning in the church, a lady said to us, "You ought to go to Gaza." And we thought, well, yes, I'd been to Gaza in 1964, I'd been to Gaza in 1968. You could easily just go into Gaza just as easy as you could go into Jerusalem. And, we went down to, we borrowed a car and we went down one Sunday afternoon, as you do. Just going down from Tel Aviv into Gaza, travelling into Gaza. Met a nurse in the nurses' home in Gaza, which was running because the Baptists had a nurses' home and they ran a hospital, the Ashley Hospital in Gaza. And we sat drinking tea afterwards, as English people do. And this nurse from England, from England, she leant across the table, the coffee table, and she said to me and my wife, she said, "You Christians, you come to England and all you do is you talk to the Jews about Jesus." I said, yeah. There are Arab Christians, there are Palestinian Christians in this part of the world. You never talk to them. You never talk to them about Jesus. And we thought, Arab Christians? Palestinian Christians? I guess we very naively thought that all Arabs and Palestinians were Muslims, which of course they're not. There are many, many Christians in this part of the world. So that was a challenge to us. And later on we met friends, Palestinian friends in the Bethlehem area. They became very close friends, and I came and taught in a Bible college in Bethlehem during the summer holidays. I was teaching at the time, and we made good friends. We set up a charity in England to support our friends in their ministry here, and came backwards and forwards during the holidays, in order to help, in order to be with our friends. And then got very friendly with people in Gaza as well. I used to travel down to Gaza and meet with the Christian community there, and then got very much involved with a Christian brother, an American, who was setting up a Christian school in Gaza. Started to support that school as well as some other ministries in the land, and that has developed and grown. And all the time we've been, raising funds to help and being there with people. And of course, as an educationalist, as a teacher, I was able to input particularly into this school in Gaza, helping them with their teaching and learning programs. And that's gone on right up until the present day. Now, we are seeking to support the Christian community in Gaza, as well as we have interests in supporting and encouraging and blessing, the Christian community in the West Bank and also in the north, in Israel, amongst particularly the Arab communities in the Galilee area. So it's been a long time, this love affair that I and my family have had with this land. In fact, the love affair goes on longer than my marriage.
Wow, yeah.
The love affair began even before I was married. But my wife shares that love affair.
Okay.
We travel together often to the land, to friends in Bethlehem, friends in the north, and also to friends, lovely Christian friends in Gaza.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's a long story, but it's been a long time. I'm now coming up to my 83rd birthday, and
wow.
God keeps me fit and well. And I've always said to God, "You keep me fit and well, I'll continue to do and to be whatever you want me to be." And so that's where I am.
That's awesome. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I want to go all the way back to 1964 and your first trip, and how old
you were, and the bus ride through Europe, Turkey, Syria.
Yeah.
That sounds incredible, and I had no idea that you did that, but I would love to hear more about that adventure.
Well, our visit to Turkey, we got through Turkey, and we got to the Syrian border, and the Syrian border was closed because there was a coup going on in Damascus. So I think they had coups every 2 or 3 years in Syria at that time. Anyway, so we were blocked, and we thought, we won't be able to get through the Holy Land, you know. So we went and camped very nearby by a very nice lake, and because we were all Christian students. We were studying theology at London University, and we got talking to some of the local young people there. They were very interested. They wanted to talk to us, and we talked as Christians to Muslims, and we shared thoughts about our faith, and we actually had some New Testaments with us in Arabic, and we gave these New Testaments to 2 or 3 of the young people that came visiting and talking with us and eating with us in our camp, and one of these young men was a young police officer, and he went back to his boss, his senior commander, and he showed him this New Testament. He said, these young people, they've come down and they've given us this the Injil, this New Testament. And he was mad. He went mad. He said they should not be evangelizing. They should not be proselytizing down here. We had people through here last year. That was from an organisation which was an international organisation that used to go around the world, literally blitzing the world with New Testaments, and in all sorts of corners of the world, in a very evangelistic way, and they got banned from countries, and this group had been through, I think a few months before.
Yeah.
And it really caused a stir or upset with the Muslim community there, which is understandable. I mean, we weren't wanting to upset the Muslim community. We're just sharing our thoughts as the Muslim guys were sharing their thoughts with us. Anyway, the police came down to the campsite. They wanted 3. They took away 3 passports. They took away my passport and the passport of 2 friends. And they said, you will not get your passport back until you leave the country. You must leave the country as soon as you can. We said, well, we can't get into Syria, the border's closed. So he said, well, you wait here until the border is open. 2 days later, the border was open. The police came down to us. They escorted us to the border. At the border, they gave me my passport back. And they said, never come to Turkey again. You are banned from coming to Turkey. And we went through the border, we went down through Syria, we met some lovely folk in Syria and in Jordan, and in the West Bank, and of course we met Christians as well, met many Muslim friends, many Jewish friends, and we had a wonderful trip. I have since been back to Turkey twice, and nobody stopped me going in.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any problem there anymore.
That's nice. Wow.
But that was our trip, and we had a great trip. Obviously, as students of theology, we learned a lot from living in the Bible lands and the geography and the whole ethos of the history of the place. So that the Bible came very much alive to us, which is of course what we wanted.
Right.
And that happened in a similar way, obviously, with the students that I took, a few years later. And of course, in 1968, it was after the 6-Day War, so we were able to come into Haifa as we did on a boat on that occasion. And then we were able to travel into the West Bank because, of course, Israel had taken over the West Bank at that point. And we were able to travel up onto the Golan Heights and to travel all the way around Jordan without any trouble, as well as, of course, in Israel, and go down to Gaza, no trouble at all. And it was a very peaceful country. Yes, okay, Israel had taken over the West Bank, and many people had left. I mean, many people had left Bethlehem and various places, and they'd gone to Jericho, and then from Jericho they travelled across into Jordan when Israel took over that part of the land. So Bethlehem in 1964, when I was here, had many refugees from 1948. They were in Bethlehem, they were in Jericho. In 1968, when Israel took over the West Bank from Jordan in that war, many of the people from Bethlehem and from Jericho went across the river into Jordan because they didn't want to be under Israeli rule. You know, they'd fled from Israel in 48 to Jordan in the West Bank. Then in 1968, they fled from the West Bank across into Jordan because they didn't want to be under Israeli rule. So that was many of them stayed, and of course there are 2 or 3 refugee camps still in Bethlehem, and of course there are some up in the north, in Jenin and Nablus, places like that, in Tulkarem. People that didn't leave, decided not to leave, and to go across into Jordan. And the camps in Jericho now are empty because the people from the Jericho area, they very quickly went across the border because they didn't want to be under Israeli rule. And those very large camps there are now empty. There are no more.
Okay, well. How would you describe your religious background, religious views?
I was brought up, came to faith as a child, really. Very active as a young person in church life. While we were members of the very open Christian Brethren. We linked with the Baptists. We sort of moved around from church to church very happily. I prefer to think of myself as a follower of Jesus. I don't want to have a label, really. Although now I'm ordained in the Anglican Church, the Church of England. But I think I was brought up very much to believe that the land of Israel, it was the land for God's people. This was the land for God's people, and the Jews, the Israelis, were God's people, and therefore they had a right to this land. I guess nowadays that would be called being a Christian Zionist. And that was my belief as a young person. That was what my teachers taught me in the church, in the small evangelical churches that I was in. But I have learned over the years to understand that, okay, the idea of the Jewish people being God's people, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with Jews living in this part of the world. I'm happy with the state of Israel. But what I am very, very unhappy about, and I think is wrong, is the fact that the people who were living here when the state of Israel was declared back after the Second World War, that those people have been completely removed from the land, effectively, and now don't seem to have any right to live in the land, although they were here long before the state of Israel was declared. And before 1948, Palestinians, Arabs and Jews were living perfectly happily together in this part of the world. And now the people that were living here, the people are excluded and they are constrained in the land. And my own feeling is that it is largely because of the settlers, the people, not the people who have immigrated into the land over the years, and that's mainly from America. Okay, there've been Russian Jews and so on. The Jewish people from America that have come here and have been accepted by Israel and given homes in the settlements, very reduced rental, all that sort of thing. They're encouraged to come. And the people of the land, the people who have lived here for, hundreds of thousands of years, they have land, they have the rights to that land, the deeds of that land, they have been kicked out of their homes, and that to me is wrong. I don't see a future for a two-state solution at all here. I think that's gone.
Oh wow!
I mean, the answer, as far as I'm concerned, in this land is for one people living in this land. Call it Israel if you want. Call it Israel if you want. Put it under Israeli government if you want. But make everybody equal that is living in the land. And that is not the case now. Even the Arabs that are living in Israel do not have the same rights as the Israelis that are living in Israel. And it's not a Jew versus Muslim situation. It's not a Jew versus Christian situation. That's not the issue at all. Some people interpret it in that way, and that's wrong. That's wrong. The people living in the land. Okay, Jews and Muslims and Christians and Arabs and Israelis living together in a land in a democracy in the land. Israel calls itself a democracy, but it isn't. It patently isn't. And of course that has led to opposition, and of course opposition which has caused some serious fightings, and the current war is an example of that.
Yeah.
The Palestinian people, they don't know what to do, so they want to fight against the situation because their political leaders are not powerful enough, not strong enough, in order to liaise with the very powerful American-backed Israeli government. I find it very sad, very sad.
Yeah. So, I'm curious what you would say is the path towards a citizenship for everyone in the land that is fair and equal. If you see however long it could take, but like, how do you see that potentially happening? Do you see that potentially happening someday?
I suppose having seen the way in which things have developed over the years, through the events of 1967, the Six-Day War, then a period where Israel was controlling the Arab people in the West Bank, and that was a time where I can remember, there was maybe an Israeli jeep that used to travel around the area of Bethlehem, of Bet Jala and Bet Sahor. And it was an Israeli jeep, and the jeep would stop by the side of the road. And I've been in a house with a family, and the jeep stopped outside, and the woman in the house, there's my friend, and taking them out a drink, and sat on the wall, talking to the soldiers. And these were what I would call experienced career soldiers. They were members of the Israeli army, and they were career soldiers. They weren't young men. They were very often older men, and they just kept things quiet and kept things happy. And the Israelis and the local people, they were going on okay. And then the Israelis were putting in roads, which made it easy, of course, for the Palestinians to travel as well. And the economy and the building programs, they all developed. But it soon came to a situation where, Israel took more and more domination, in a sense. And then, of course, that made the Palestinian people unhappy. So you had the First Intifada. I can remember the First Intifada, which was where the young Palestinian people used to play games with the Israeli soldiers, because Israel said, you must not have a flag. There must not be a Palestinian flag anywhere. And you had the young people making kites and flying kites. And I've seen Israeli soldiers sort of shooting at the kites, getting the kites down, and then there were young people running through the streets with their banners. There wasn't any. There was a little bit of stone throwing, but not much. It was all sort of quite sort of peaceful in a way. But that, of course, nothing happened with that. And then you had the Oslo Agreement and all sorts of things happening on the international front, and nothing was really resolved. Then you had the Second Intifada, and of course the Second Intifada was an intifada with guns. That made all the difference. No guns really in the First Intifada. And then you had the blowing up of Israeli buses, and you had cafes in Jerusalem where bombs were set off, and you had some terrible things happening, which the Palestinians were doing to the Jews, to the Israelis, and it all got very serious. And everybody was talking, there needs to be a solution, there needs to be a two-state solution, we need to resolve this. But nothing happened. And of course nothing has happened all the way through, and then in the early 2000s, there was elections as far as the Palestinian Authority was concerned. It was Fatah versus Hamas. Hamas won the election in order to rule over the West Bank and Gaza. And the world said, the Americans said, and the Israelis said, we're not having Hamas. Hamas has won the election, but we're not having Hamas. It was a fair election. Nobody was arguing that it was not an unfair election. It was a fair election. And consequently there was a split between Fatah and Hamas. Hamas went to Gaza. Fatah stayed in the West Bank. And so there was a split in government, and Fatah was ineffective, basically, in running the West Bank. The Israelis took more and more power over Fatah. Hamas ruled in Gaza, and eventually, of course, the Israeli settlements that were in Gaza, they were removed, and Hamas, controlled it. Israel put a border around it and controlled going in and going out. And the Palestinian people were split in two in terms of government, and Hamas government became, how can I put it, more and more militarily orientated, and you had, I don't know how many wars you had, I think 2009, 2012, 2014, 2018, I don't know how many. And there was sort of short-term wars. Hamas would throw a few rockets over, Israel would retaliate with great force, then it would stop, and it would all sort of carry on an uneasy sort of situation, which of course erupted massively in the terrible events of October the 7th, 2023. And what Hamas did then was evil, was wrong, was deadly, was terrible. The killing of Israelis on the border area, and the taking of hostages. And then, of course, Israel retaliating with massive force, which of course is continuing to the present day, on into 2025, and it doesn't seem, like finishing at all. Because and all the way through, going back, as I say, I go back to the 1960s. The situation in this land has got worse and worse and worse. And, the talk about peace, Israel doesn't really talk about peace. They talk about domination and rightly about security in their land. The idea of peace seems far away from the Israelis, as it appears to be far away from the Palestinian people. But the world, and particularly the Christian world, talks a lot about peace, and Christians have their conferences, Christians have their organizations, Christians talk about peace and about what should happen. Okay, justice and peace, combine them together. But nothing happens. There's no serious political move, and even the religious leaders of the world, of the Christian world, that is, they talk when they come here, come to the land, and it's very encouraging for people in the land to have delegations and groups of Christians coming and supporting. I'm thinking particularly of the Christian community in this part of the world. It's very encouraging, and it is something that Christians can do. I call it giving people who are in a very difficult situation the present of presence, and that as a Christian leader, which I guess I am, in England and seen as such out here. Just coming and being with the Christian community in Gaza, being with the Christian community here. The Christians here appreciate that. In fact, I often say that meeting with my Christian friends in Gaza, they'd rather see me than have my money. Because you're coming in to be with somebody who is in a very difficult, very, very black situation. And the presence is something which is very valuable and important. But talking. I feel about many of the organisations, the Christian organisations in America. I mean, I get all their information. I see it on Facebook. Oh, they're having this conference, and then somebody flies from one place to another place in America, or they come out here and they talk. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. Mm-hmm. The only thing that changes is perhaps the encouragement that those people give to the people in the land. But it's the talk of peace and the talk of friendship, which is all good. But to bring anything to a conclusion whereby Israeli and Palestinian people can live together in harmony, forget it. I mean, my nature, I'm an optimist by nature. I'm a person of faith, I'm a person of hope. But this is a situation where I say to God, this is so big, it's so big a problem, I can do nothing about it. This is in your hands. I'm opting out. Yeah. Wow. This is your problem, God. Because I can't see any way in which the situation can be solved. Wow. And I feel I don't want to be involved in talking. I want to be involved in giving and helping the people that are in a very sad, very bad, a very traumatic situation. So I would prefer to send a couple of $1,000 to a friend in the Christian community in Gaza so that he can go and buy expensive food in Gaza, than chat about peace. I would prefer to help in that sort of way to improve the living and the livelihood and the way of life, and indeed the standard of life to people here. And all the money you spend on conferences and all the money you spend on travelling around the world talking about it, I'm afraid I feel is pretty useless. Now that will sound very critical, perhaps to people listening to my words now. But I will encourage people who hear these words really to examine the difference between talk and action. Talking about it, talking about peace, or making peace. And I can only see peace being made as political leaders really get down and sort things out in a fair and a just way. And the leaders of the world don't seem to want to know whether they're in America or whether it's Netanyahu in Israel or whether it's the Arab states that are surrounding us here in Israel. Nobody really wants to get down to make a difference. It's not making any difference except on the personal, day-to-day life of individuals in this land. And it's the same for Israel, I feel. I feel very sad that recently Netanyahu was called up so many more reservists in order to deal with the situation in Gaza. There are families in Israel where their young men have now been called up to go into a pretty deadly situation in Gaza. And, there are families that are crying because their soldiers, their young soldier children are being killed in Gaza. And there are people crying because the hostages are still there in Gaza. Are they alive? Are they dead? I don't know. Nobody knows. Everybody hopes.
Right.
The Palestinians, the Israelis, and the whole country, the whole area is sort of imploding. I mean, the political situation in Israel and the difference between opinions and the arguments and the whole sort of psychology of the Israeli people is being seriously damaged in terms of their mental health and their perspective on life. And that this is exactly the same, of course, in Gaza, where the people suffer. Everybody's suffering, and I mean, the country of Israel is not a happy country by any stretch of the imagination. And the people, now the people in Gaza, there are people walking the streets in Gaza, and they are assaulting other Palestinians because they want to steal their phone.
Wow.
Or they're breaking into their houses, and they're breaking into warehouses and stealing food. My friend told me a couple of days ago, I was talking to him on the phone, he said, Palestinians are being killed in Gaza, assaulted on the streets and being killed as items are being stolen because the people are desperate for money and desperate for food.
Yeah.
The whole area is not only exploding because of war, it's, I would use the word imploding. And it's just going on and on. I hate to say it, particularly to my Palestinian friends, that nothing is happening and it's getting worse and worse. That's my perspective.
Yeah.
And of course many Palestinians are wanting to leave the country. Many of my Christian friends, they want to leave the country. And I can't blame them.
Yeah.
Christian friends in Gaza, they've left Gaza when they could leave Gaza before Rafah was closed. Now one of those friends with his family are in Australia. They don't really want to be in Australia, but they had the offer, so they go. Can I blame them? I can't blame them.
Right.
I can't blame them for going. I don't want them to go. One of the guys, he's principal of a school, a Christian school that I support in Gaza. A wonderful guy.
Go ahead. Could you tell us a bit more about the school you support in Gaza and the history with that, how it looks, how you're able to be the hands and feet of Jesus in that situation, in that context?
Yeah, I mean, the school was opened in about 2020, in the first year of the millennium, 2001.
Okay.
And it was opened as a Christian school, run by an American Christian organization, and it's a school, as you say, has a Christian ethos. It's a place where there's prayer and There are Christian and Muslim teachers. They work together with all the children in a very poor area of the of Gaza City, and we have been giving them a really good education. Many of them can't afford a very good education. There are Christian-led schools in Gaza with the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Latin Church. They do charge quite a lot of money for the school, and the Muslims love to go there. There are a small number of Christians in those schools, but they are led by priests and by Christian leaders in the Gazan community. And the Christians and the Muslims live quite happily side by side in Gaza. They provide a lot of. They have caring institutions. The Christians have hospitals that are run down there, and the Near East Council of Churches have a technical training place there. And of course there are Christian schools in the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church and this independent Christian school. And we're just giving the kids loving care and good education. I have to say that the local schools run by the Palestinian Authority, they're there, but the standard of education and the standard of care for children is not as good. Large classrooms, quite a, I won't say brutal, but a very old-fashioned way of discipline, of hitting children, strong discipline, which is not really consistent with good standards of education and care. So providing education in a loving, caring environment, which is what this particular school does, which I've been supporting, is really really important, for the children. And that school, of course, has been closed since the 7th of October. Although it was reopened, and the teachers, most of the teachers are still in Gaza. They would be in the two church compounds. They reckon there's probably about 600 Christians left. Before the war there was about 1,000 Christians. Wow. Quite a number have left. And they are, when the ceasefire took place, a few days after, we opened the school, and for I think about 3 weeks we had over 100 children from the locality who should have been in the school for the last 18 months. They came in and we had school running. But of course then the ceasefire finished and we had to close the school because it wasn't safe for the children to travel and so on. The school building has a little bit of damage, but not sufficient to stop the school functioning. If we could open the school tomorrow, it would run tomorrow. The safety of the children would not be in any danger. Of course, there will be work to do to get it back together. And I'm hoping and praying that when the fighting finishes, which it will finish one day. Then the school will be able to be open. Will the Christians stay in Gaza? Big question mark. They may feel that they can't. I don't know. Many Christians, of course, in this part of the world are leaving anyway. That's from the West Bank. Many are wanting to leave because the way of life in the West Bank, of course, has deteriorated significantly due to the war because of the action of the Israeli army and also of the settlers in this part of the world. But will the school open? Will the teachers stay? Will we be able to make school run? Will we have the funding in order to run the school? These are all questions that I'm thinking about. Although at the moment I do have a lot of funds which people have generously given me for when the school begins. I am optimistic that there will be a school. Whether it will be for 280 children, which it was before,
wow,
or not, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping. But how Gaza will be with the devastation that has come about, and whether the people will be able to leave, whether they will want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have talked to some people in Gaza. No, we're never leaving. We're never leaving. This is our home.
Right.
And others would be happy if they can come to the West Bank where they have friends and family. Will Israel allow that? I don't know.
On the thread of prayer and praying, you said something a few days ago about praying for enemies, and I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that.
Well, I think the Christian world is often very focused, has very clear one-channel focus. I mean, I read so much, particularly about evangelical Christians in America, and it seems to me that the focus of their prayer is always on Israel. Israel, they are God's people, so therefore they must win, therefore they must conquer, therefore they must be strong. So therefore pray for Israel. And I think, yeah, okay, but what do you pray for Israel? What do you pray for Netanyahu? Do you ever pray for Netanyahu? Do you ever pray for his cabinet? Do you pray that they will act justly and rightly? Or do you pray that they will be almighty, powerful conquerors, and kill the Amalekites? I mean, Netanyahu has said, we've got to treat the Palestinians as in the Old Testament we treated the Amalekites. We have to kill them and their children.
Wow.
He said this. I remember one thing. And the focus always seems to me to be on praying for Israel. But what about praying? What about praying for your enemies? What about praying for your enemies? I wonder if people ever pray for maybe Hamas leaders or Islamic Jihad leaders, or for those people. Even do they ever pray for the Palestinians in Gaza? That Israel says, well, everybody is everybody to do with Hamas. Well, it's patently not true. Of course it's not true. But you pray for your enemies. I remember many years ago, a dear friend of mine, he wrote an article in a Dutch newspaper, a Christian newspaper, and the headline was, have you prayed for Osama bin Laden today? That was the headline. The criticism he got was amazing.
Yeah.
And this was, a leading Christian minister. in Holland. And of course his retaliation was, didn't Jesus say that you should pray for your enemies and pray for those who despitefully use you? But he got a massive amount of criticism. And people perhaps listening to this may say, you're telling us that we should pray for Hamas? You're asking us to pray for the people in the Yemen that lob rockets over into Gaza, or for the Houthis, you know? And we pray for Hamas leaders? Well, do you believe in prayer? Do you believe in prayer? Do you believe that prayer changes things? I do. So why not try it? Why not pray?
Amen.
Pray for enemies. Whoever you feel that enemy might be.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say to Palestinian Christians as well, you know, pray for people who might be leading Hamas, and also pray for Netanyahu.
Yeah.
You know, mix your prayers together. If you feel that Netanyahu is the enemy, pray for him. If you feel that Hamas is the enemy, pray for them. You know.
Yeah.
Because this is what God calls us to do, and you know, you are putting what I believe, you are putting the situation very firmly into God's hands, and you are, as it were, cooperating with God. Let God do His work, but for goodness sake, do your best, you know, to echo to God what is in your heart, and what needs to be the situation. The situation needs to change, and prayer, I believe, as a Christian minister, prayer does make a difference. Don't stop praying. It would be better if you turned all your talk into prayers. Don't talk, pray.
Wow.
Don't talk, do something. Help. Get money together. Don't spend your money on flying around America speaking at conferences. Send your money into Christian communities that are hurting in the West Bank, or Christian communities that are hurting in Gaza. You know, do something, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And above all, pray. Pray.
I wanted to ask you about how your perspective on the Holy Land, well, you've been here a bunch of times, and I know from myself, I can say from my personal experience, coming here is what expanded my mind dramatically to the real situations on the ground and what it actually is meeting people. So I'm curious if that's also what taught you more than anything else, more than reading about it, more than hearing about it in the news. Yeah. Was it being here?
Yeah. I mean, this is what I would say to anybody and everybody. You know, for goodness' sake, come here. Come here. I mean, over the years, going back into the 1980s, right through until I think 2016, I have been bringing groups of people out, tour groups, regular tour groups, bringing them out to the land here. Often I've got to have an Israeli tour guide, but I'm always around to correct the Israeli tour guide, and I always insist on, say, visiting the Bible College, Bethlehem Bible College, and meeting with Palestinian Christians, as well as meeting with Israelis and sometimes Messianic believers, Jews who believe in Jesus, and the visits of those people, the visits with those people, it changes their lives.
Yeah.
I have brought tours here quite deliberately, in order that those people can go back and they can talk about the life here and the situation here, and also give money to the different organisations and the different people. And I mean, I've got people who are emailing me now and sending me money who've come to the land with me many years ago. They still have a different perspective on the whole situation, and that's what I would encourage people to do. I'm involved also with a college in Jerusalem, and we bring people that are ordinands from the Church of England to the land for courses, so that they can go back and they can speak to their congregations and their churches about the situations here. But the problem since October the 7th has been devastating, of course.
Yeah.
For the tourist economy here. The hotels have closed and people are not coming. People have unemployment here, massive unemployment in Bethlehem and in the West Bank, because people aren't coming here. They aren't buying the olive wood. They aren't staying in the hotels. I mean, it's devastating. I mean, it's one of the serious aspects of the war, the way in which the economy of the Palestinians and also of the Israelis, of course.
Yeah. With
the lack of tourism, it's really hit hard. Particularly where we are at the moment talking, which is in Bethlehem. Very, very sad. But yeah, people come here, and it is. I mean, it's safe now to come here. Okay, people see, a rocket landing on the road on the way into Ben Gurion Airport. Happened a couple of days before I arrived. And of course now people say, I'm not coming to Tel Aviv Airport, and flights are cancelled. But people can. It's safe here. It's safe here. Well, I think it's safe here. But of course, when people abroad hear these things, oh no, I don't want to go. I'll go to Greece. I don't want to go to the Holy Land for all day, or for a tour. But I feel it's safe here. But I can understand the fears of people. I can understand that. But as soon as there's a chance, for goodness sake, come.
Yeah, I would
come
agree.
to the land, meet the people.
100%.
It'll change your life.
Yes, it will.
It'll change your life.
I have one more main question, and then if you have any other things you want to talk about or like final takeaway messages, I'll give you an opportunity for those. But I'm curious, I think a lot of the listeners are Western Christians, Americans maybe, and I'm curious if you see any common misconceptions about the Holy Land, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that you would want to clarify for the listeners.
I think the conception that there are no Palestinian Christians is one thing. That all Palestinians and all Arabs are Muslims. That's one perception, and I think needs debunking. Also, the idea that Christians and Muslims are against each other, or certainly that Muslims are against Christians. That is not true. There are isolated cases where things happen, but the same happens in America. Same happens in Europe, where you have Muslims against Christians. I think the idea again with some people that the Jews. All the Jews are bad people as well. That anti-Semitism is wrong. The idea that particularly Christians in America, for goodness sake, love the Jews, love the Arabs. We are all, in a sense, God's people, and we all need to be loved. For goodness sake, don't polarize your views. Don't be anti one thing or for another thing enthusiastically. And certainly don't follow what I see in America particularly. It's not so bad in England. The Christian Zionist sort of attitude of Israel can do no wrong, Israel is right all the time. And sometimes I think it's necessary to almost make a distinction between the Israeli and the Jew. Not many Israelis would call themselves Jews, but there are many Israelis who are not strong Jewish believers, as I put it out, not Judaistic in terms of their belief. And we need to have an open attitude of love for all people, whoever they are, and to put aside your sort of narrow, focused view of individuals. That there is only one way, and also as far as Christians are concerned, I think evangelical Christians, if I can use that term, I don't like the term, but if I can use that term, they also need to have an understanding that there are strong Christian believers in the established churches, in the Orthodox churches, in the Melkite churches, in the Roman Catholic churches, and not to sort of be polarized in thinking, oh, they're not evangelicals. They're not evangelicals. There are your Christian brothers and sisters in the established churches, and don't think that just because in your little gospel hall, they're somehow wrong because they have one or two little peculiar views, perhaps, on the edges of their faith. And often it's to do with maybe Mary, or to do with the Eucharist, with communion. People have their polarized views. No, come on. If they're followers of Jesus, we're all followers of Jesus. And let's unite together, and let's love each other, and pray for each other into a better world in this part of the world. All the world is God's world, but there is a little bit special about this part of the world, as God's world, because of course the Son of God, the Lord Jesus Christ, walked in the hills and in places. There are, in my opinion, perhaps two locations in this part of the world where I could walk over stones and I could say, yes, Jesus walked over these stones. That's all. The rest of it, I'm not sure. But Jesus was here. No doubt about it. So for goodness sake, let's love this land. Let's love the peoples of this land, and let's live together in the way in which Jesus Christ wanted us to live together, in harmony and peace, and act in such a way that becomes a possibility. Joining together in hope and in prayer and in love, in order to make the life of all people, particularly in this part of the world, a better way of life.
I love that message of unity. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final thoughts? Or takeaway messages, key points that you want to make sure are sent home?
I think just going back to something I said earlier of giving to people who are in need and who are in difficult, troubled situations, wherever they are, both in this land and in our home communities. Giving people time, and I go back to that little strapline, giving people the present of presence. The need to be with people in trouble, and there are people in this land, they're in trouble, they're hurting, whether they're in Gaza or whether they're in Jerusalem or whether they're in the Israeli army or whether they are buried under the rubble in Gaza. Okay, you can't give people the present of presence in Gaza at the moment, but one day it will be possible. But the message of being with and loving, and not having preconceived ideas, not polarizing your thought, being open as a Christian follower of Jesus, and living the Jesus way, doing things that Jesus would want. And that includes praying for your enemies, of course.
Amen.
In every possible way.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much, sir, for your time. And not just your time here to sit down with me, but also your years of experience and service and ministry. And it's an honor to be able to learn and hear from you and all of those things. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm hoping to come here when I'm 100.
That would be incredible. Did you mention how old you are?
I've got 17 years.
Oh yeah, you did.
I'm nearly 83.
Wow, incredible. Yeah, praise God. Thank you so much.
And that is a wrap on episode 1. Thank you again for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this, please write a review, leave a comment, like, and share. Send this to someone that you think would benefit from listening to it as well. That helps us out a lot, helps the word spread about this new podcast. If you want to contact me with thoughts, questions, concerns, suggestions, best way to reach me will be through social media. You can find me Josiah J. Shaver on most of the platforms. Thanks again, and I hope you tune in to the next interview.